Okay, it should be on. All right, folks, welcome. I think we're on the, oh, geez, I should keep count. I think this is the seventh. We're
Yeah.
either in the seventh or the eighth Fiyah Literary Magazine author interview. I'm Christian, also known as AG Dub. I do the social media and the art direction. And we have a special individual here today to speak to us. And so what I do is I let the author introduce themselves, just in case I feel like, well, not just in case, but sometimes I feel like, I can hype you up and tell everybody how a rising star you are and how you being award nominated and winning and all these other things that people may not know because they haven't been following you for the last like 4 or 5 years.
Hmm.
But I also think it could be interesting to see how the authors like talk about themselves.
All right.
So, without further ado, can you give us a little intro?
All right. Basically, blow my own horn, right? Hey everyone, I'm Tobi Ogundiran. I'm a Nigerian writer of speculative fiction. I'm the author of the short story collection Jackal Jackal. This came out last year from Undersoul Publications. And so far, it's been nominated for the Locus Award, the Shirley Jackson Award, World Fantasy, and British Fantasy. So I'm excited. I'm also the author, most recently, of In the Shadow of the Fall, which we're talking about today, and really excited about that.
The
I've
crowd
written
goes wild.
what?
I said the crowd goes wild.
The crowd goes, yeah, yeah, most definitely. I've also written a bunch of short stories which have appeared in journals, The Dark, Fire, magazine of fantasy and science fiction, the whole works. Um, some have also appeared in like year's bests anthologies, also Africa Risen, The Book of Witches, and two of my stories actually have been read by the legend, the man, the myth, the legend, LeVar Burton on his podcast, and yeah, that's still surreal to me. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, to mention, you all can go to Fire, search Toby's name, see which issue he's in, and buy it. 3.99.
Yeah.
We got it tagged for you.
Hmm.
Um, all right, so I'm just gonna move into the first question. Because I'm excited to talk about this actually. So, the big main question, what everyone wants to know: why this novella? Why a novella? Why this story right now?
All right. Okay, that's there's like three questions nestled in that one question. Why a novella? The truth is that I'd written, I think, two full-length novels, which sort of died in submission. That was with my old agents, and I was sort of, disillusioned and loath to write yet another full-length novel. Spend a year, 2 years working on that without a guarantee that it was actually going to get picked up by some publisher and be published. Basically, I considered the time versus ROI, return on investment. I thought a novella is it's shorter, quicker to bang out, and if it ended up not going anywhere, then it wouldn't be as much a disappointment as a full length novel with all that time invested in there. It so happened that I had the perfect story for the novella. So um, the first book is called In the Shadow of the Fall, but the series is called Guardian of the Gods, and the short story actually appeared in Fire in 2020, titled Guardian of the Gods. So this is sort
Whoa.
of an expansion of that short story. And Brent, wonderful, magnificent Brent, just hit me up on Twitter. Like, now he was talking about the story because he really loved it, and he was like, if I happen to write a trilogy in that world, he would read it and buy it and shout to the rooftops and shout from the rooftops about it. And I thought, I can actually expand this world. So I decided to expand that short story into a novella. That's how that came about.
That's madness.
I know.
These connection points. And just to think that it was also the one that was in Fire as well too. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, that's congrats. I mean, and congrats on that. But also thinking, what you said, I found really interesting that you thought of. just from like what had happened to do a novella, and then you had this idea that can work for it. Not that it was like the idea, and then it was like shifted into a novella. It was like a
Hmm.
novel. I feel like
Hmm.
sometimes like and I've been thinking about trying to condense the work. It's like I may see it as a novel, and I try to like make it a novella, or like what part of it could be like that.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. Like a lot of people have been saying that too. Like the novel's been long, like a really long run game, and then trying to sell it is also sometimes difficult and like
Oh yeah,
not
for sure.
necessarily like a motivational to keep going.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let me see. And so okay, so was it what issue was that? Do you remember the exact issue in Fiyah
Fire
that you were
Fire
in?
14. Yeah, I remember. It was a I think it was June. It was the summer issue of 2020. Yeah. It was the
That's when I think
unthemed
I
summer
just got here. Yeah.
Fire 14. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, it was unthemed. I was gonna say was it a themed one?
Yeah, it was an unthemed one.
Um okay, yeah, so I was just thinking about what brought it about. So it says, yeah, basically the next part of that question is like why this genre? I'm like, I guess like in Shadow of the Fall. Like how did you
Hmm.
because to me, it kind of when I first saw the cover, I instantly thought Wheel of Time, the
Okay.
Icedy sort
The
of
ice
like
that yeah.
women. Yeah, like I was like it's given that sort of vibe. And I
Right.
was waiting for that scene throughout the whole thing. I was
Did you
like,
like the scene?
yeah, it was great. It was like to me. I told you, like I said, I loved it. I thought it was like it was worth the build up. I
Yeah.
thought it was gonna come sooner. And then when it came, it was like, oh, okay, I like
Hmm.
that. It worked. It felt epic in a sense, like that appropriate for the moment. So I thought that's what I initially was sort of thinking with it, and then it kind of has, sort of the epic fantasy vibes, and it kind of reminds me of the Broken Earth trilogy a little bit, just in terms
Hmm.
of that. I feel like there's this really complex system at play, and we're just getting like a glimpse of it, kind of like when you first get introduced in that first book. The first part's
Yeah.
like, oh, this person's really wrapped up in a much larger sort of situation, but we're getting this sort of little bit of the story. And I kind of feel like you really did that when you brought it all at home about like why this is the main character at this moment at this time. It really sort of subverted the chosen one sort of
Hmm.
like main hero character story, a character arc you usually get. So I really felt you played on a lot of those, and I kind of like that. But then at the same time, it doesn't necessarily meet that standard, like Will of Time. Like it's not like Will of Time,
Oh
like
no,
at all.
no, not at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like they're not like those like witches at all. So it's like I feel like it has it still fits in the aesthetic of the epic fantasy, or but it's like I feel like you made your own lane within like the mythos and the plot. Um, yeah. So let me see what my next question is. Okay, so next part is, can you tell us about the process? It says from conception to publication. And how did it end up becoming like a duology? I know you had mentioned Brent said something, and I know you
Yeah.
had mentioned that you had an old editor. So that's always interesting to hear, I think, from folks who don't have editors, and then how people have to either go through another editor or how they end up finding the editor or whatever the case may be. So any of that would be great too.
Yeah. So once I decided I was gonna write the story, sort of expand, the short story and Fire into what we have now, I started to consider the larger, context of the world and how to really touch on the plots, but also the themes that were only hinted at in that short story. And at that time, I happened to be reading Ursula Le Guin's Earth series, Quartet, and I think it was the second one, the Tombs of Atuan, which has very similar vibes to, In the Shadow of the Fall. For anyone who's read that book, there's a girl priestess who's, has been offered to the gods, and she's in this secluded temple, and there's this whole reckoning with religion and her place in the world and all that. And I thought that was, it was doing things that I thematically also wanted to explore in my own work. So I borrowed very heavily. I was inspired by that book, but also, it's a West African inspired fantasy, Naturally, I also took inspiration from my own culture, Yoruba culture, the Yoruba gods, the gods of the pantheon, and the whole cosmology and all that. Um, and I knew it was going to be a story about gods, but I also knew I wanted it to be a human story because if gods are like all powerful, omniscient, and all that, it gets pretty boring. There's not really much you can do with that. But if you have them, if you ascribe like human characteristics or really focus on the mortals in that story and the relationships with the gods, then it makes for something much more interesting, but also relatable. Um, yeah, I took and the grills, which exist in real life, the like this history keepers, storytellers, and I was really fascinated with them, and I decided to like incorporate them in the story and have them play a central role, in not only in the world of the story, but also talking about memory and history keeping and what um the fallibility of memory, but also how overall history can get warped when passed down from generation to generation. The phone game or whatever, like you whisper a word to one person and that person whispers the word down the line, and eventually it warps. So that's kind of playing with that idea in as related to the grills. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that part actually really fascinating as well. I felt like it it kind of opened the world up in a way that I thought maybe like the interlude would have did like a compare and contrast of what how she lived, but it was like we kind of did something else, and then this kind of like gave us a real strong comparison, and she had we saw the unlearned with her. I
Yeah.
thought that was fascinating to go through this sort of like shock. It was like it was kind of surreal because she was going through all these things kind of like back to back to back to back.
Yep.
But it really worked out, I think, in terms of like the emotional arc and like seeing her really play out through it. I thought he did a really good job too with the being close and giving like some thoughts, but not like feeling like the narrator knows every single thing she's gonna do. It still
Hmm.
felt like the narrator was still like with the reader a little bit. I felt like that, like you know what I mean. Like, okay, is she gonna do this or not? And I thought that was very interesting too because like I said, it was just a nice closeness instead it's still connected to the world as well.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to check out the Ursula. So I read the first one, but I haven't read the second one.
It's really good. I think that's the best of the series. Yeah.
Hmm,
Yeah.
okay. And so when you okay, so you did the fire short story, came out, Brent tells you it's amazing. Then you say, okay, let's explore this, let's outline or like whatever. And then so it went into like you're gonna do a novella. Cause I mean, I don't know how many words is the second one, but
The
this
second
one
one
is
is it's about it's almost, I think it's 50K, so it's much more significant. Yeah.
okay, okay,
This is
okay,
about
okay.
32 and pretty
Really?
slim
It
slim
feels less.
volume.
It
Yeah.
actually feels less than that.
It feels
I'm
less.
actually surprised that it's that. I was gonna ask you the official word count because I was like, it feels about a good like
It's very
20K. Like
hey.
it feels about 20K under. I was like, I really flew through it like
That,
pretty and not like I was rushing. You know what I mean? It was just
yeah.
like it was just succinct and it was got to the goods. Um, and so okay, oh, interesting. Okay, so I mean, that'd be what like 80K overall, 80, 90K. Okay, so yeah,
Yeah.
that could be split, but yeah, it seemed like that'd be. I was wondering, was it like um, because I've been thinking about maybe like because sometimes you see like a trilogy of novellas or like
Hmm.
dual, or I see a lot of duology, duels of
Hmm.
novellas, and I'm thinking wonder sometimes I wonder if those would have could have been once one novel
Yeah.
but then they split it out because it's like maybe one needs its own plot focus or something of that sort.
Yeah.
Stuff that I was sort of wondering. I mean, this is before you first did. I mean, they announced the second book, and so I remember reading that it was over really quick, and I was like, I was going to be super interesting to see the story end that fast,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like. You know what I mean? And you not to want more. I was really trying to, and
Hey,
then
I have
you
had
announced the next part. Like,
readers be like, "Yeah, it was too like they want more, or it was so short, or it could have been combined. You know, the first and second halves could have been combined into one novel, and something's fleshed out. But you know, it is what it is.
mhm.
It's always going to be like subjective how it's received and all that. But yeah,
Do you
I'm
feel like
happy.
it was you or like the editor or like you decided like, oh, these need to be two separate entities or
So I sold it as a novella. So I decided it
okay.
was going to be a novella. I sold the first one, and only after that, once I had a deal in hand, and I and I knew the story wasn't going to be cut short or whatever, and I was contracted for the second book. That's when I decided to write the second book. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you sort of outline it or no? You just only had that first little
No, no,
part.
no. I
Interesting. Okay.
I'm not an outliner. Nah, I had a general
It's coming out
idea,
pretty soon after. That's pretty quick, I feel like.
and I guess it works perfectly because guys read the first book, which is pretty short, and they're like, "Oh, I want," and it
Yeah.
ends on like such a cliffhanger. They're like, "I want the next book now,"
That was what I was gonna say as
and
well. It's
thankfully,
perfect. I saw it
the
in January. It's
yeah,
like just enough time.
yeah, thankfully the wait isn't going to be long, and
Mhm.
you're not going to get burned as some authors have burned us in the past.
Yeah, and it's a little, and like you said, it's a little bit more meatier. I was like, because I was thinking like maybe this is gonna be a trilogy one, because a lot of them do the trilogy novella or they do a series of novellas. So I
Yeah.
was thinking maybe that too. But interesting. I'm super again, like I told you, I'm super excited for that. I'm like really invested in this world.
Mm.
Let me see what my next question makes me jump off. Oh, your favorite excerpt. Okay, yeah. Do you got a favorite excerpt from the story?
Yeah, it is one because I've done a couple of readings, and I guess I that's one I go back to again and again. This is the first time the main antagonist of this book in particular shows on screen, sort of appears on screen, so to speak. So I'm just gonna read a brief excerpt from that. The city of Skigas accosted Yarudin as he stepped off the boat. It stank of fish and night soil and the rank stench of humanity. Hundreds of stalls had sprouted up on the road leading away from the docks, each seller trying to outshout the other as they bellowed about their wares at freshly arrived travelers. The din was maddening, and Yard longed to quiet them. But that would draw too much attention, and if there was one thing the teacher taught them, it was to never draw attention. Yar allowed the throng to sweep him off the docks and into the city proper. He remembered the time when it had been little more than a hamlet, a measly collection of hovels lurking in the shadow of the Skagassi Mountains, the small folk subsisting on what they could barter from their cane sugar farms. Now, broad thoroughfares lined the city, buildings of stone and baked earth towering high into the sky. This was not the Skagas, Yah remembered. But then, the world had changed a lot since the fall. The deeper into the city he ventured, the more he felt the pulse, a subtle tugging in his chest, like a beacon calling to him. He had felt it ever since he had roused from slumber, and it allowed him to know the location of his brothers and sisters scattered across the 10 kingdoms and beyond. You need a room, Baba? A place to eat? A whore? I know all the good places here. Cheap too. A youth of no more than 13 seasons had fallen into step with him. He had the hungry look of an urchin, the sunken but bright eyes told of a life spent scavenging on the streets. His dashiki was many sizes too small, so that he looked like an insect stuffed into a sack. Yah frowned at the pendants around his scrawny neck, a crudely carved effigy of a hunter and a dog, the symbol of Ogun. I will require room, said Yar. The boy flashed a grin and nodded. Come with me, Baba. Evening was fast falling, and the denizens of Skagas flooded the streets, some clustering about smoking suyo stands, others flocking to taverns. Yar struggled to keep up, and the boy kept looking impatiently over his shoulder, dark eyes sweeping the street as he urged him on. He was leading Yar in a direction opposite to the pulse, so that with each stride he felt the tugging a little less. What is your name, boy? The youth frowned in suspicion. What's it to you? You do me a great favor. The least I can do is thank you properly. The boy seemed to consider it a moment, then shrugged. Vig. Thank you, Vig. The boy grunted, ushering him ahead. It is just around the corner. Yar stepped into the alley, which was really a narrow space between two shanties whose grimy walls were crawling with wet moss and poorly disposed night soil. A wreckage of old furniture and broken wagon wheels blocked the alley. Should have saved that thanks for later, eh? He heard Vig sneer behind him. I'll take that sack, old man. Yar turned around to find Vig blocking his path, a dagger at hand. Are we alone? Yes, no one will hear you scream, old man. Yar smiled. Good, very good. The boy frowned, as though he couldn't quite comprehend why Yar was not responding the way he expected. Do you want to die, old man? His voice climbed the register. Drop the sack and fuck off before I open your guts. He squealed as Yar seized him, locking one arm under his armpit and twisting the other until he let go of the knife, and it dropped to the ground with a clatter. Then, Yar slammed the boy into the wall, pinning him by the neck. The boy started to whimper, eyes rolling like a spooked horse's. Thank you, Vic, said Yar softly. Wait, what are you? For this gift of your body. Most bodies Yar took without warning or preamble. Rarely did he grant his prey the grace to know what was coming. And for those he did grant, they never quite understood exactly what it was. Please. Tears licked down Vic's grimy cheeks. Please, just let me go. I'm sorry. In the name of the teacher, Yar muttered, then ate the boy. A share was an endless thing, the life force that thrummed through every living entity, from the birds of the air to the trees of the forest. And as Yar's spirit rushed out of his body and into Vig's, he saw the boy's Asher, a pale ball of light flickering almost like a firefly. Yar rushed towards it, consuming it until there was nothing left of the boy, so that it was as though he had never existed and could not be reincarnated. The boy's memories remained, trace vestiges of a life that was, that could have been. In any other case, Yar might have kept them, the better to blend in. But there was no need. The boy would not be missed. So he discarded the memories and released himself, taking his new body like bronze filling the shape of a new cast. All right, stop there.
Hey. That's really no, I love that scene too, actually. That's also like one of the interludes. Um, can you tell us why that's your favorite scene?
uh, well, I feel like it's a really explosive, debut of the antagonist. It really, paints in the mind of the readers that this is someone dangerous and not to be trifled with. And you fear for the protagonist, but you're also intrigued at um this villain and the power they possess, but also what he wants, where he's going, who he's meeting up with, and things like that. I feel, if I do say so myself, it really does a good job of presenting this really terrifying antagonist.
Yeah, that's a good intro. Uh, um, the the way that the character has their ability reminds me of um Octavia's Butler Wildseed. She has a villain named Dora
Oh yeah,
or something like that. Or
that's
and it was
correct.
like I felt like maybe you and her are the only people I know that had this body jumping power, like and used it in a villain way. So maybe that's why it reminds me of that. But I really like that. It adds a sense of thrill to it because it's like one of those abilities like which I feel like in yours and kind of in hers, like they couldn't stop it. It was like and it was like a high level god ability. It was like
Mhm,
and
mhm.
it was something that people had to deal with. You had to deal with this person, this power, and it wasn't just you can like adjust to it or fight it head on normally. So I really appreciated that sort of like um kind of like I don't want to say overpowered, but like this kind of like you said, this threat imposing in on our homegirl as we've been, starting out with her. Because it's like, oh, if he gets to her, is he just gonna take her? Or like you said, what's the reasoning and what's happening with that?
Mhm.
Which, we find out later. But yeah, I agree. And then, like I said, I don't know if that was like if you had read that before or not, but it's to me it
Yeah.
just reminds me of this sort of like because he was like a stark, complicated villain in that story, and his power sort of shaped who he was. And
Hmm.
so that started to make me think like, well, who was this person before he had this ability to do this?
Yeah.
Or, things like that, and like why he was doing these things and stuff like that. And like, you gave, like you said, just enough really for us to glimpse into this character's life and like see where they're going and like where it's gonna like eventually, connect. Even though we didn't know exactly where he was gonna meet the
Hmm.
protagonist at, but we knew that it can be anyone because he was jumping. So this was like in the back of our minds, like is any of these people possibly this person? So I thought that was an interesting setup, like you said, as well, to really put this sort of like mystery thriller moment, in the scene there.
That's a very astute observation because, yeah, in fact, the villain's powers were inspired by Doro from
Oh,
Wild
okay.
Seed. Yeah,
I was wondering because I was just
yeah.
like, it really has that same, like, it's really fearful because you're
I
just like,
think you're
there's
the first
nothing you
person
can
to.
do about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're the first person to draw that similarity. And yeah,
Yeah, it was. The funniest part is that that's the only one of that series that I've read, and
it's a
I
really
don't
good
know
series.
how it was. That one, I was like, I wanted to read the rest, but I didn't. I didn't get a chance to, and it was just
Hmm.
like she really did a good job of that. It really wasn't
Yeah.
just let's imagine black people in the future.
Nah,
It was
Octavia
like,
Butler's
how
she's
are
a
we
goat.
doing kinship? How are we contending with humanity? What is human and stuff like that? I really like that she explored those things with like near far future and alternative realities too. And also just like this sort of like contending with like race science and species and like as well. It's like she
Hmm.
really sort of use the sort of anthropomorphic ways that we can think about how the humans position in society and just like really like forced us to realize how we also reproduce these sort of violences in our micro ecosystems too. I think she's brilliant, and obviously that's good sort of like associations.
Yeah.
um I think that's cool too. It's so interesting just to see some of the like, I don't think I've talked about that novel, Wild Seed, in a very long time. I think I read it maybe like 6 or 7 years ago,
Wow.
and at a used bookstore. I ended up getting the real small one with it's like blue and gold, and so it was like with the paperback version.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I ended up wanting to finish reading it, but not. But it was just like that kept being in the back of my mind. So that's very interesting that you also read it too. Look at that. As they say, these ancestors, they're they're still working.
Yes, they are.
That's exciting, Joe. No, okay. What I was going to say? Yeah, okay. Do you have a favorite character in the novella and why?
Favorite. Ah, I don't know that I have a favorite character. I love each character for what they bring to the story, the unique way they present, but also serve the story. Yeah. Yeah. I think each character, because they're all my creation, they're
Mm,
wonderfully, wonderfully crafted, but also they're all necessary for for the story. Yeah.
okay, that was a. I think you might be the first person to say that. Is usually everyone has a character that they like, or has
Eh,
a character that everyone
I
else
don't know. I
likes.
don't know. Because I take a lot of fun writing villains because villains are just they're much more
Hmm.
interesting. But also particularly, and maybe particularly because this is a novella, slim volume. Each character serves a purpose, and I tried as much as possible to make them fully fleshed and fully realized, and like real people, real human beings. Yeah, I love them all.
No, that's rough. Okay. Our next one is, as I mentioned before, which do you prefer, short fiction, novella, or novel? As the popular thing is that what I've heard is that you start out with short fictions, and then you work your way to novellas, and then you
Hmm.
work your way to a novel because you build your audience up. But a lot of people have said various different other things. So I try to ask each author that come on is like, what is their sort of take around that sort of like pathway, or your experience or etc.
I, unlike most authors, started off writing novels. I used to write novels as a teenager, and I would give it to my friends, and they would like take turns, really fight over because I wrote it longhand in a notebook. And they would like fight to read, which did wonders for my ego, of course. And I tried to get those books published as a teen, without any editing, without, yeah, it was, and thinking back on it now, obviously those books could never have been published. But when I got like countless rejections from agents, I thought maybe a short story collection would be easier. It wasn't, but again, I was a naive, naive teenager. So I decided to write short stories. And I think I wrote the first two maybe in 2017 or so. It was at that point I discovered SFM magazines. And I realized, wait, you don't actually have to have like a collection of stories to publish a book. You can actually publish the individual stories in these magazines. And I started publishing. My first acceptance was from The Dark. And that was just like, for someone who's been trying to get published for so long, that one act of validation just spurred me on, and I kept writing stories, more and more stories. And something interesting happened. I fell in love with short stories. And at the same time, realized it was a completely different art form to longer works of fiction, like novellas and novels. And so I honed my short story skills, um, master the craft, I guess, as much as one can master a craft. So I do enjoy writing short stories. I don't plan to stop anytime soon. Although now I'm much focused on longer works. The short stories I write these days are much more solicited for, like, from editors who I've worked with in the past, or for some anthology or whatnot. Um, which do I enjoy writing the most? I would say, well, short stories, because it's shorter, and there's that sense of accomplishment from writing a short story. Whereas a novel is anything from 6 months to a year, and it can feel like this endless slog, and you're not really sure that what you're writing makes sense. Because I'm like 40K into my novel now, and I had to send it to my agents to be like, tell me if this is trash or not, just to know if I'm on the right track, which of course doesn't happen with short stories. Short stories, I bang them out in a week or two, and I feel that sense of accomplishment of having written something. Um, but each bring their own fulfillments to me. Yeah, yeah.
And so, is it like, do you just feel like the story is like it just come to you, and then it's like it's a short story, or you're like, I'm gonna do a short story and then, or like I'm gonna do a novella and then, or is it like a vice versa, or it depends on the project? It's like you said, I know you say some people may solicit you, so like, oh, do you got like a 5,000 word or something like that, or
It depends. Sometimes I think I have a short story, and it just keeps ballooning and ballooning into like novelette and novella and then full length novel. But for the most part, once I have an idea, I can whittle it down to short story length. Um, if need be, just like I did with this novella, right? It was initially a short story, and my short stories sort of work in that, and I guess in the way every good short story should work, the world should feel larger than the words on the page. So if need be, you could always return and flesh out the world and make it something bigger, make it a novel length project. So most of my short stories sort of fall into that category. If I had to blow them up to something like a novel or a novella, I could. Um, yeah, but for the most part, I decide, all right, I want to write a novel, I want to write a short story, and I just go from there.
that's wrong.
Yeah.
I think I realized the thing with that is too. It's like I sometimes I try to, like I said, I was trying to make it short, and it just ended up just just not being, it's like
Yeah.
this would just be longer. And so I'm just interested in like this sort of people who hop in between the different
Hmm.
styles, or which ones they had a preference or why. Because when I remember with P. Shelley Clark, he was saying that novelettes and novellas didn't really exist like 5, 10 years ago. They wasn't really like
It
publishing those,
wasn't
and
really a
now
thing.
that's like the trendy thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then flash fiction came back in and it was gone for a bit. And so it's just these various different trends that are happening. And so he was just like, yeah, now that it's in, and he feel like, and he also likes the shorter style too, like as well. So it's just very interesting how people, I think the other people had indie press, and indie press were looking for novellas and not novels. So that's how they sort of
Yep.
went down that route. So
Yep.
it's just interesting how it seems like folks are leaning towards a novella, and then but they also do still dib a dab in both too.
I appreciate the brevity of a well-crafted novella because, again, most
Hmm.
novels, especially fantasy novels, some books you're like, the author is just trying to pad this out. He doesn't have the word counts to fill out, the
Mm.
story, but he's trying to go for that novel length, epic doorstopper fantasy novel size, and it's just unnecessary words. So I really appreciate a book that goes straight to the point and tells an effective tale while that's it. And again, all this categories is a product of our modern publishing landscape and marketing and all that. When we think of novels, the classics, but also like, novels of the 20th century, 19th century, they are what we'll call novellas today. Like Dracula, Frankenstein, they're all really slim volumes, novella lengths that we're going to call them novellas today, but they're called novels. So, yeah, it's all marketing and stuff. Yeah.
No, that's right. Our next one is okay. Yeah. Can you do you like elaborate and talk about the structure and in terms of like, not naming the chapters, using the interludes, and having the interludes as like differentiating between point of views? I mentioned a little bit earlier, I thought the interludes would be the point where, there'd be a hyper like let's see a contrast between the main character and the life that she lives in the world not. But it wasn't technically that, I feel like you kind of remix the interlude. You was like, actually, we're gonna forward the story and add some more drama in there,
Yeah.
or so like some more spice. And so I really did appreciate because I was like, okay, I know what these interludes are gonna be for, and it was like, actually,
Actually.
it was a little bit more than I thought. And so yeah, I was just like, I really loved that. I really like that was one of the that sort of structure really inspired me and
Hmm.
find it very like fascinating, cool. I don't know, hip, whatever you want to call it. Like I was just like, this is cool. I kind of want to try some of this out. And so yeah, I was just interested in about. I haven't quite seen it done this particular way, maybe in print. Like you usually see it in like music. Um, so it's
Yeah.
like that's also to me what I didn't. I wanted to. I mean, I didn't want to assume that you were like maybe bringing a musicality into it, or this was like sort of meta and planning with these like aesthetics or form styles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just interested in like why interludes, like why the chapter doesn't have names,
Mm.
or and then like only those parts are you bringing in different POVs, like any choices behind that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Um, Interludes are something I've seen in a handful of novels, but most notably in N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy. And I found that they served a particular purpose. In some, I think Sanderson also has some interludes in his books, and those like serve for like world building, focus on other characters. In my own case, I knew well it was a slim volume, and we're mainly going to follow the main character Ashake and stick closely to her own point of view. And so the interludes serve to expand the world, see the point of view of other characters, and for dramatic irony, I guess. Because again, we see the villain, we know the villain is making moves, but the main character is totally oblivious to to this event. And
That tension was building,
exactly,
especially with the witch doctor,
yeah,
Baba Fata. Baba Fata, yeah.
Bafatai, yeah.
I was like, oh, not. I was like, damn it, the hell.
Yeah. I
But I knew it had to happen. I knew it had to happen. It was just
yeah.
like, oh shit. But yeah.
So that's the whole function of those interludes. They serve to bring in the point of views of other characters who deliver really concise but also necessary information to the reader, not necessary to the character Ashake, because she doesn't know what's going on. Also creating that time.
She had enough going on. She could handle
Hey,
one
yeah.
more piece of information. If she had one more piece of information, that was gonna be it for her. I feel like.
Yep, yep. She had her plate pretty full. Yeah, that was the idea behind those interludes, and they continue in the sequel, in that same manner. Following other characters, but also delivering really necessary information to understand the whole picture of the story. And why unnamed chapters? I did plan to name the chapters. I think in my notebook somewhere I actually have like the rough drafts for each chapter, rough titles of each chapter. But again, I love titles. I mean, In the Shadow of the Fall is pretty epic, if I just say so myself. And I tried
It
to
is.
name.
It works with the because the fall is this thing.
Yeah,
It really it played like after once you finish the story, it makes more sense. You're like, okay, I get it. Yeah, yeah,
yep, yep, yep. And I tried to also bring that to the chapter titles, make it not just some random name, but really poignant and pertinent to the chapter. And I think maybe for two chapters, it was really tough for me to name them, and deadline was coming close. I just decided to scrap the titles. Yeah, that's what happened.
yeah. It's real. It'd be like that.
I know. Yeah.
I think it sort of worked too. It didn't. It wasn't too much of a distraction. It just felt like we were just, we was it was going on, and I think the having an interlude was enough break, no
Yeah.
difference to sort
Yeah.
of like
And
make
the
it a
interludes were in a way titled. Yeah.
title. Yeah, I was about to say, I believe so. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. I have to. You made me want to read the Broken Earth again trilogy again. I was just talking about it. I haven't read it since before the pandemic, and so everything feels fuzzy.
Same actually. Yeah. It's been a while since I read it.
I remember just burning through it, and then now it's like I thought they was gonna make a movie. That's the last thing I heard. Like, and I don't know what happened, but I
Hollywood
know it'd
moves.
be like that.
It
They
moves
announced
very
it all like
slow.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I might check that out. I might have to go back to that. Let's see what the next question. So my next question is, can you talk a bit about representation and what that means for you as an author in this field? And I know you mentioned earlier, like Fiyah was one of the places that had published your work, which led to this. But yeah, like what sort of I think we're just looking to talk about the relationship between like people who was like Devon and Brent, who's been like Justine and Troy and LD, who are just like, oh, we saw this gap, we're gonna do this,
Yep.
and like how that is also. I mean, like I think you may be the first person I talked to that said their story. They took a story from Fiyah and morphed it and sewed it, which is like that's like we need to put you on the billboard
I
and
know.
get you on a commercial or something because this is a real life American Idol story here, folks. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I was just like, I mean, because I feel like that's something when I was right before 2020, something I really was thinking about and like wanted, and was like, okay, what does this look like? Does me
Yep.
just going to get an MFA sort of equate to this, or do I need an MFA to write stories or whatever? Like,
No,
I would
no, you
figure out
don't.
yeah, the short fiction market and just all these other different things, and then like in 2020, I found out about Fire.
Yeah.
And like I think even to this day, it's like the only place that just like upfront says if you're black, you can apply.
Oh yeah.
And so it's just like, yeah, just thinking about that within this field with like as it's like the representation of like, oh, these YA people are selling, or you have a couple successful things, but it's like in the overall market, it's still like a very low percentage of Black people actually getting published. And then thinking about like migrant or immigrant status as well, that gets even lower than that or niche in the field. And
Yeah.
so just like thinking about the roles that we play and like who we bring along with us and that, like just like in terms of like, yeah, your motivations and things like that. I just always wanted to curious about, why outside of like identification and belonging, but why do we write, black characters? Why do we write stories that we relate to and people that we care about, we relate to, and things of that nature?
Yeah, I can't stress the importance of fire in the field, but also in my own journey. I wrote the short story that was published, the short story of this Garden of the Gods, specifically for fire. I saw the call for the unthemed issue, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna write my blackest story ever, and I'm gonna give it to these guys, and hopefully they're gonna love it. Because again, at that point, I don't I don't think that story could have been published or accepted by any other magazine editor. Yeah, because it's really unapologetically like African inspired, but also the section of the grills singing, which is almost identical to what we have in the story, is, I mean, some would say, yeah, that's not really effective, or it's telling, or what, or some other Western ideal of proper storytelling or something like that. And yeah, so I was really glad when Fiyah accepted that, and really the support really from Devon, from Bran, L, everyone. In the same year, I also was published in the Breathe Fire anthology that's on Tor.com. That was also like an apologetically black story, like critique of colonialism and empire and all that. They published that. And so seeing, this space created specifically for black folks, and that was really good. That was really encouraging for me. At the same time, there are other like black pioneers in the field: Enki Jemisin, Octavia Butler, Tade Thompson, Nadia Okorafor. These are the folks I saw writing speculative fiction, not pandering to the West, and writing speculative fiction that focused on black folks, African inspired, Afrofuturism, and all that. I saw them do that and realized I can do this too. There's a space for us to write our own stories and not have to, whitewash it and make it palatable or some such thing. Yeah, so representation is really, really important. Now there are more black authors writing and publishing. Even though, the powers that be would always want to saddle us with the responsibility of sales and marketing and all that, and try to prove that we're not marketable, but there are black readers who, blurs, right? Who are absolute geeks and love fantasy and science fiction and horror and everything speculative fiction. They love to read this, they read comics, very, very happily read, want to see themselves represented in the books they read. And there are countless black authors also writing. So I'm really excited about, you know, the nature of the field. Basically, there are more of us producing this work, showing folks that, yeah, we're here, and that's really good.
Yeah, and also like it's been quality. I feel like all the award nominations and winnings from like Yvette and PJ Clark and Wale, you like all these other people who have Eden,
Yeah.
who have been like involved in fire and stuff. Like it's not like we're putting out bad stuff either.
Oh
Like
no,
at the same time, just like not even to
the
be like the
fire
more
alarm
bad,
is on
but
fire. Let's say that.
it's like yeah, it's a really good sort of and it's like it's so wild because when I was growing up, I was just always thinking this would be something. I was like, why don't we have this? Why as like a teenager, it was like it's so funny because I was laughing with my friends. It was like the anime characters they'll be black, but they'll be a little brown, but you just call
Mm,
them black anyway.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's
That's
like
legit.
trying to find yourself in like the little bit of what is and now I feel like you said, it's more, or it feels like it's a more or a larger pool of stories where the
Yep.
majority of the characters are like particularly black or like are engaged in a way that their blackness is sort of not just a characteristic, but a metaphysical sort of like ontological
Yeah,
entity around how they're existing. And I feel like it has a certain like je ne sais quoi that I feel like you can tell when a character is just made black in a story. Besides, like this character or
exactly.
every people in this world exist as black people. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's like yeah. I'm gonna have to pull you again. We're gonna do something else about telling your fire story. trying to get you in a documentary or something.
Oh.
We gotta work on something. I feel like that's a like. I mean, there's not the only, but that's a really good one. Your story that I hear.
Yeah.
And Brent and Devon also did that. I think who else talked about that? Maybe when I interviewed Brent, talked about the Tor.com philosophy fiction,
Yeah.
Fiyah spirit team situation. I think Yvette was in that.
Yvette was in there. Sui
Um,
was in there. There was
it was a
me.
lot of good people. Yeah,
Oh
it was,
yeah.
and this was like
This
2021, like middle
yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah.
Like,
This was 2020. It
oh,
was
so yeah,
2020.
2020. Yeah, it was
Four
like
years ago
wild
now.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a lot going on in the
I
world, and
know.
this came out. I thought it was a really good, fresh thing,
Yep.
especially with Tor. Like this again, Tor was in there bad. Whoever was in their little marketing thing,
Oh
they were
yeah.
like getting
Oh
where
yeah.
they fit in, and it was really that
It's
2020 was a really good year for
yeah,
them.
Ellie Goldman at Tor really supports like us black folks.
Mm.
Yeah.
The more now you know. Okay. Next question is. Oh, we almost at the end. We sped through this one a little bit quicker. I guess it is a novella. It's a little shorter, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
definitely
no problem.
is.
Well, we know that the part two is coming out, but can you tell us about anything else you got going on in the future?
I am working on my novel, which I hope to be my debut, full length novel. So not a novella. It's a loosely Peter Pan inspired story. So basically, have kids kidnapped from Africa, and they're able to overtake the ship and they land on the island where they land on becomes like the Neverland Forever Land, and it's basically like a critique of empire and colonialism and all that. I'm really excited for that, and
Is it what's the genre? Is it YA? I mean, you mentioned kids. Is it YA?
oh no, it's adults.
Okay, I didn't know. You had kids. I was like, well, you're going into
So
the
it's
YA.
it's an
So
epic saga. We're gonna have
okay.
different timelines from the 1500s, but also 1800s, UK,
Wow.
and one of the kids is now an adult, in the UK with no memories of what happened. It happens. So what happens? Like the kids on the island, time freezes for them. So 400 years pass, and they think it's just like a week. One of the kids escapes from the island and finds himself in the UK with no memories, and he grows up to become a man. And there's this whole like reckoning with the folks who kidnapped them, but also trying to bring down the monarchy. Yeah, I'm really
Ah,
excited about
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
that.
I can't wait. Well, obviously, I'm gonna bring you back for the sequel. Um, because I can't wait for that. But that also sounds great. I love a good series that you can kind of, at least like a trilogy, you can expect
Hmm.
something.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I really do like appreciate long form in novels. It's like I love that I can really spend time in it and like read it until I like get sleepy or I got to do something or
Yeah.
I want to read it instead of doing what I want to do or what I got to do, like that sort of situation. So I do love that sort of, especially when I read like a bunch of short stories. I'm like, okay, I can imagine you doing something like
Hmm.
longer. So super
Yeah.
excited for that too.
I,
And the last question is, what would you say to yourself when I bring you back in the future? So it'll be next year for
next
the
year.
interview, but and
I
you're the
hope
only
it's
person that was like soon. Yeah, I'm definitely probably gonna read it. I already have it pre-saved.
okay.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, what would you say to yourself in the future when I bring you back?
Uh, what I said to myself, well, I hope you
Or
turned
what
in that
advice would you
draft.
have for yourself? Yeah.
Oh, what advice
I,
I thought
instead
you were
of
gonna
like
say.
the old ones like what would you tell yourself when you was a kid? It's like what would you tell yourself in the future?
I hope you're not. I hope you're not stressing too much about your position uh in the field and what you're gonna write, and just general worry and listening to the voices in your head and all that. I hope you're have reached this nirvana, I guess, states where you don't really care about reviews and what people think, and you're just doing your thing and writing the stories and telling the stories you wanna tell. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna play it for you next year, so we're gonna see if you reach this level of writerhood,
Yeah,
um, the Stephen King status.
I know.
Um, yeah, Dimitri, you got a question for Toby? Cool, yeah. Actually, what?
Hey,
Okay, so it's a question and it's actually a comment as well. I really love that you use I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Orisha, the
yeah.
deity. I really
Hmm.
like that. I only saw that. I've only read that in another novel that self same metal. I actually know that gods are very like prevalent or very popular now. So I want to know
Yep.
if you're gonna plan to do anything else with that because I like that more than because I mean I think we know enough about Greek gods already. Yeah, it's another
Hey.
book about Greek
Oh,
gods.
oh yeah. I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Knowing enough about Greek gods and the Norse gods was actually one of the inspirations for me writing about the Orisha, about Yoruba gods. I do have a couple more ideas. I do have one novella I hope I'm going to be able to write, which is going to follow one particular god of the Orisha. And that god is the one who has the epilogue in the second book of this. You're just gonna wait until January.
LOL.
And he's
You-
more, let's say the god is the one responsible for all the shit that went down, in the series, and he's really fascinating, and I hope I get to tell his story.
This is the Judas at the table with Jesus. So I knew you was gonna betray me. I knew it
Oh,
was gonna. This
yeah.
is exciting. Look at this breadcrumbs. I just asked you what you was going to do in the future, and you didn't even mention this. Thank you, Dimitri. You had to bring it up out of hell. I was just
Yeah,
like,
you got that out of me.
I have one more question, and your descriptions are very lovely. It's very beautiful, and I was just wondering of when you're writing, do you imagine certain locations?
Yeah, I imagine them quite vividly in my head. So I am I guess what you call a visual writer. I see the scenes, and writing for me is just kind of like transcribing what I see in my head onto the paper. Yeah. So I get, and that's what leads to the vivid descriptions, I guess.
What are some of these vivid descriptions, Bradley? Where are they? If you could tell us, where are they in the world?
Where are they in the world?
Mhm.
I don't know that they are anywhere in the world. It's more my imagination. Um, and they aren't, particularly for the first book, there are not a lot of locations, right? It's the temple and then the riverbank, and I think that's it. Yeah, not a lot of locations, right? So, just my own experience, like being in the deep forest and the deep jungle, in Nigeria, the riverbank, and just feeling really small and humbled. Because if you go like real deep into the jungle with all them old trees, thick foliage and canopy, it kind of humbles you. You feel like, or you understand the insignificance of your existence. Yeah, so I try to capture that in my writing. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yep.
mm. All right, thanks, Toby, for coming to talk to us. You can get In the Shadow of the Fall wherever you can purchase books. No, I don't want to say no names because we don't want the book people to be mad at us. All places where you can buy books. I
All
didn't
places.
realize the thing. Yeah, I want you to say certain places where to buy them at.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. You can get them everywhere
it's
you
like
get
you would
books.
ideally you would think people be want you to say buy wherever you can get it. But I don't, it's like you said, it's the marketing thing.
Yep. Yep.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this novella. Like I said, I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was amazing. It was succinct. It was like superb. It was provocative. It was very interesting. Excited for the sequel. And what else we have coming down? Yeah, I'm gonna try to do, like I said, I'm gonna try to do something else again because I really think this is like you're gonna be the fire poster boy now when you win your Hugo and your Nebula. It's gonna go down in history. Um, it's like the stars align.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I appreciate you even taking time, the patience with me, and just doing this. This was just like great. And like I said, next year, we'll be back at it with
Yeah.
the sequel.
Thank you. I
Any last
appreciate
words
you.
for us?
Thanks for having me. I had a blast. Really interesting questions, really fun conversation. Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you all, folks, for coming. And yeah, this will be up on our YouTube after. And see you later. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.